Yo guys, Crescent here. Welcome to my ESO 2018 annual review. So basically in this video I'll talk about the state of PvP. I know this is a overused title for ESO videos, everybody is doing it. And obviously I want to do a bit of a class balancing as well, class skill line balancing overall. So the main reason why I'm doing this video is because lately there's been a lot of videos coming up on my YouTube timeline that is complaining about the state of PvP in ESO, and then they will just ramble about heavy armor is too tanky, is too strong, or sniping is too irritating, or just stuff that they dislike, you know. So I feel like a lot of the commentary from a lot of the ESO YouTubers are really biased, in my opinion. They don't look at the bigger picture. Why? Because of what are the changes and stuff like that. So that is the main reason why I want to do this video. So I want to share my thoughts on the meta and the state of the game at the moment, both in Battlegrounds and CP and non-CP PvP campaign. Another thing that I will take into account while I'm giving my thoughts about what needs nerf and what needs buffs, I'll take into account the PvE side of things. So I'll consider whether this will affect the DPS of PvE, or maybe, I don't know, the tanks of PvE or stuff like that. Basically, the changes that I will suggest would have a really small impact on PvE, as small as possible. So because it comes hand in hand, PvE and PvP, so you can't separate both of them. That's why it's really important to consider that side of the game as well, because a lot of the players are actually PvEers, so you don't want to make PvEers mad. Alright, so now to the content of this video. I'll begin to talk about Cyrodiil and Battlegrounds, what are the improvements made in these few patches, and what are the problems that are still there. And after that I'll talk about bleed damage, and I'll talk about maybe master weapons, because they are overperforming a little bit at the moment. And the third part, I will talk about proc sets in general. Are they good, are they bad, or do they need nerfs or buffs, stuff like that. And the fourth part, I'll talk about armor types, so mainly light armor, medium armor, and heavy armor. What is the situation? Are there imbalance between the armor types? And the fifth part, I'll quickly talk about race. There are two races in particular that is a little bit underwhelming in my opinion. Races are actually quite balanced, because most of them are actually quite useful for different classes. So, but there are two races that I think it's a little bit weak at the moment for PvP. And to the sixth topic would be classes. So I'll be covering both stamina and Magicka classes for all classes, both Magicka and stamina. And with a small exception, because I don't really play Templar and Magicka Declare enough to give my true opinion on those two classes. Of course, I got a really good general idea on how to play the class, how the class functions, sets that the class needs, and stuff like that. But I just feel like I'm not at the top tier level for those two classes, so I won't be giving too much. I'll keep my ideas short on those two classes in particular. And this video is going to be really long, so make sure you have your beverage ready, and if you want, you could skip to a certain topic by just clicking a time link in the description below. So you can, if you want to go to Stamina Nightblade or Magicka Nightblade, you can just click the link, go straight to that part. You can skip the topic that doesn't interest you. Okay, now let's start off with Cyrodiil and Battlegrounds. Firstly, I want to talk about Cyrodiil. So how okay, the biggest issue of this game in Cyrodiil is always the same issue. It's the performance. Everybody knows this already. I want to keep this as short as possible because it has been repeated for 100 times already. So I'll just give you an example. During prime time in PCEU campaign, in CP campaign, the moment the population is full, the lags will start kicking, and it's still bearable at that moment. But the moment guilds come online, like proper raiding guilds, like 15-man raid guilds that spam a lot of AoE stuff, and the moment they fight into a Zerg or near a keep, the lag is going to be unbearable. It's terrible. So that is for CP campaign. It's just, yeah, the performance will just drop rapidly the moment guilds are online and the population is full. As for non-CB campaign, however, the situation is overall a little bit better, I would say. Only during peak prime time around, I would say 7 and 8 p.m. Evening, the lag will start kicking in. It's mainly due to the fact that in non-CB campaign, everybody is really scared to spread out the map. So the moment one keep is under attack, everybody will just run to that keep. So yeah, that is the biggest problem. And I don't know, man. Everybody is just so scared to fight outside the keep that is under attack. So that is the problem that causes non-CB campaign to be really, really laggy. And the guilds in non-CB campaign are extremely zergy as well. They're like 24-man group everywhere. So that is another problem. But anyways, I'll leave that topic. Performance issue is the main focus for ZOS. You need to make this right because it has been way too long. And yeah, you need to allocate most of your resources for PvP into making the performance better in Cyrodiil. Okay, now to Battlegrounds. Oh yeah, before I go into Battlegrounds, I want to give Swords a small compliment for the changes they made to the map. So basically we have the towns are linked to the keeps at the side, and there are 3 more outposts now. So the map is slightly more spread out, which is better. And what else? And yeah, they make Mao Gate and bridges now. You can destroy them, so which is a good thing as well. So mainly because yeah, bridge fight has been so ridiculous before the patch. There's always been 30 AD versus 30 EP just sieging each other like idiots. So that is gone now because the moment you siege the keep will go down. You can destroy the keep, sorry, the bridge. I mean, that's a good thing. And now to Battlegrounds. So what I think about Battlegrounds, there are 3 things missing at the moment. Battlegrounds is fine, to be honest. It's fun, but there are 3 things that ZOS can do to improve Battlegrounds significantly. The first one would be a lobby-based game. So you can create a lobby. Players can join, your mates or people from other guilds can join, and then you can just make a custom game with the game mode of your choice. So you can train with your group or something like that. You can do tournaments. That would be really, really interesting. And of course, would be great for players, for newer players, to just make a lobby, play it, and just what do you call that? Discover the map, because there are some map. Because at the moment everything is random. You can't choose map. You can choose mode, but you can't choose map. So you just go into a random map, and a lot of the new players don't even understand how the map is. You know, because some maps are really, really big. So I think that would be really, really great for the newer players as well as for the hardcore players. So that's the first thing, lobby-based game. And the second thing is a proper MMR system. Yes, at the moment there's MMR included, but you don't know your number. There's no competitiveness to it, because sometimes when you go in, you might meet somebody which is equal skill to you. Sometimes you might go in and still meet somebody that is not strong, even though your MMR is high. That is a problem. So what ZOS could do is just implement something like what Dota did or LoL did, which is really, really simple. So you can do like something like, at the beginning, everybody start off with 4,000 MMR points. So after each match, if you are placed third, your MMR will get reduced by maybe 25 points. If you get first place, you get increased by 25 points. And if you place in a second, so you won't lose any points, you won't gain any points. And yeah, this system is really good, because then you can separate 2 things. You can make a MMR system for solo queue and an MMR system for group play. So if you queue in with the group, you get a different MMR points for that. So you have 2 separate MMR points rating. And the higher your MMR is, you're going to fight higher MMR players. And you can see at the beginning of the match, maybe that guy has 5,000 MMR. So he's a really good player. So he will fight against players that has that amount of MMR system. So you can balance out. Okay, let's say your group has 3,000 MMR player, and you are fighting a lot of 5,000 MMR player, then they will include maybe a 6,000 MMR player to the group to balance out the system. So that is what MMR system is, especially for those MOBA games. And yeah, with that you can obviously reward. So you can do a season type, like 3 months there's 1 season, or 2 months there's 1 season. After 2 months or after 3 months, you will reward the top 50 MMR players, and then after those 2 months, your MMR will drop back to the average. Everybody will receive back to the average MMR, and then you can you can go again. So you get rewards for grinding your MMR, and then there's a competitiveness to it as well. So there are bragging rights as well. So you make the game a bit more, you know, not so casual, so to say. Of course, you can do like a non-MMR game as well for the casuals. That would be nice. A non-MMR game mode for casuals. So you won't break the game for the casuals as well. There are still modes for casuals to play. And the third idea is optional. Battlegrounds with champion points would be interesting, because for me, I personally prefer non-CP campaign because players die faster. Healing is less strong. People can't dodge throw 10 times in a row and stuff like that. So, but some people prefer CP campaign, CP PvP. So maybe include a CP PvP choice option, so players can go into battlegrounds with CP. So that is optional. But yeah, that is the third idea I have for battlegrounds. Okay, now let's hop into the second topic, which is about bleed damage. So as a lot of people know, bleed damage is really strong in non-CP PvP, mainly because it's really hard to out-heal it, especially when you apply multiple bleed damage on your enemy. So it's gonna hit really hard. In CP campaign, it's still fine because you have really high healing due to the 2 CP tree. You can include healing received and healing done, so you can just boost up your healing a lot. So I don't think bleed is a big problem there. But especially in non-CP campaign, bleed is really strong. So what can you do about bleed? I have I would say, yeah, another 3 more options Zos could implement to kind of make bleed not as strong as at the moment. The first one is a hard nerf. I don't like this one, but I'll just say it out. So you can make bleed non-critable, so you can't crit with bleed damage. This is a really big nerf to crit, but I don't think it's deserving such a big nerf. So but that is one option Zos could implement. The second option would be a better one. It's a soft nerf. So at the moment, bleed ignores all your physical resistance. So you could include maybe a 40% or 50% what do you call that? Bleed ignores maybe just 50% of your physical resistance, maybe not like 100%, because at the moment it ignores all your physical resistance. So you could make a 50% reduction, so to say, to bleed. So I think that would be nice. And the third option would be something like you tackle the main problem of bleed, because at the moment there are a few bleed proc sets, but those bleed proc sets aren't that strong. The only one that is really strong is Master Daggers. So what you could do is really simple. You could just reduce the tooltip of Master Daggers, because at the moment, if I'm not mistaken, it includes 1.3k damage for every tick. So you could just reduce it to 1.1k damage or 1k damage. Then the bleed wouldn't be that strong anymore. But you don't want to overly nerf that set, because a lot of people actually farm that set to actually make use of it. So ESO is MMO RPG, so you need to farm sets and you have to spend time in dungeons, hours and hours in dungeon to get the sets you want. So if you overly nerf a set, I will see that there's going to be a lot of unhappy players, because they actually farm it. So you just want to nerf it to the point that where it's strong but it's not overpowered, so to say. And yeah, as for people complaining about Axe's passive, I don't think it's overly strong, because the proc chance is only 16% on melee attacks. So 16% is not really high, and you need to use 2 daggers for it, or either 1 2-hand, and you will be sacrificing a lot of damage, because if you compare to for example, daggers, you will lose about 10% crit. If you're using daggers, you get 10% crit, or if you're using sword, you will lose about 5% damage, which is actually quite significant, because the 5% damage affects proc sets and everything else, and your healing as well. That's why swords are really strong. So it's a trade-off by using Axe. So I wouldn't nerf the passive of 2-hand and dual wield, the bleed passive. So I would just leave it at 16% with the same amount of damage. Just maybe nerf master one-handed axes. That's all. That's the only thing I would do. Yeah, that's about it for bleed damage. I think I think bleed damage is something really unique because it gives you another dimension to the game. You don't want to take the whole mechanic away from the game. That's what I don't like. If you're taking so many mechanics away from the game, like Magicka Sorcerer shields are now based on physical and Magicka resistance and crit damage, so you're taking away a lot of the layers of the game. You know, you want to keep a lot of layers so the game is still there are a lot of stuff you can theory craft about the game. So that's my thought about bleed damage. Okay, now to the proc sets. Oh yeah, proc controversial topic. I'll give my honest opinion. Yeah, proc sets are strong in non-CB campaign, but they are actually quite bad in CB campaign, mainly because there are obviously nerfs to a lot of the proc sets, and the biggest nerf is the crit damage. You can't crit with proc sets anymore. That is a really good nerf. And nowadays, all the new proc set has a really long cooldown, 10 seconds cooldown usually, most of them. And yeah, the strongest proc set previously was Viper, got nerfed as well. It's a dot damage now. You can cleanse it, you can cloak it, doesn't hit that hard anymore. So proc sets in CB campaign is not a problem, but in non-CB campaign, it's strong, but it's not overly strong, so to say, because in non-CB campaign, your stats are lower because you don't have CP, your health is lower, your Magicka is lower, your stamina is lower. That is pretty obvious. And on top of that, if you're using a proc set, you're sacrificing a 5-piece bonus, which is usually what gives you a lot of resources, a lot of stats and a lot of resources. So you're sacrificing that for a proc set. That is the trade-off you need to. You have to sacrifice to use the proc sets, okay? And yeah, proc sets is another dimension to the game as well, just like bleed damage. Because for example, if you take away all proc sets from the game, okay, everybody is just gonna build just to focus on max stats. For example, if you're a ganking build, you're gonna focus a lot on crit, a lot of weapon damage, and if you're a normal 1vx build, you'll focus on overall high resource, high penetration, high stats. Everything is just going to be really dull. So proc sets will spice up things a bit, because proc sets will give you different effects where you can either snare people, you can apply I don't know, status effect on other players, you know, other dots, or just instant damage. There's a lot of things you can play with proc sets. So the proc sets is like a theory crafted dream, so to say. You can include a lot of different stuff to a build. That's why I think proc set is actually quite fun to have. But the most important thing when Zos is creating a proc set is I have to give Zos, and the most important advice is to include a lot of conditions to proc sets. What do I mean for condition is, for example, when you create a proc set, you can apply something like it only procs with crit damage, or it only procs with melee damage, or maybe it has only 40% proc chance, or something even like it only procs with dot damage like Scoria. So if you include with this kind of conditions, the proc set will never be overpowered because you can't proc it that often and it's quite random. That's the beauty of proc set. You want to make it not too strong, but just good enough that players might consider to use it. Yeah, just for example, the old Viper is just way too strong because the only condition is it has a really short cooldown, 4 seconds, and the only condition is to use melee attack. That's why it's just way overpowered before that. But they change it now to a dot damage, so it's a lot better now. Okay, so that's my thought about proc sets. And now to the fourth topic, it's gonna be armor type. Oh yeah, armor type. If you want my honest opinion now, I think all the armors are balanced because they nerf heavy armor, because heavy armor is overpowered due to the previously gives you weapon damage and spell damage. That's why it's so powerful. But now they nerf it. They nerf Constitution passive as well. So overall, heavy armor is good, but it's not strong. Offensively, you are way better going with medium armor. You get so much cost reduction. You need to remember, cost reduction include dot throw and break free as well. So that's why it's so important. You get higher resource gain by having high recovery. You get higher crit damage. Dot throw is cheaper as well. So it's so much stronger medium armor in my opinion. The only thing that is keeping heavy armor alive is because heavy armor has a lot of high weapon damage sets like Fury, 7 Legion, Ravager, what else? 7 Legion, Ravager, Veil Inheritance. Yeah, these few sets that are really powerful. So what I say is to do not nerf or buff medium armor or heavy armor anymore. I think they are actually in a really good place. The thing that Zos need to buff is Shuffle. Shuffle it went from a top tier skill to a garbage skill instantly because of one changes to Major Evasion. Major Evasion now does 25% reduction of AoE damage. It's nice, but if you want to compare what it gives you from Shuffle, Shuffle gives you 0.5 second what do you call it? Immunity to immobilization and snares for each medium armor you use. So usually you use 5 or 6 medium armor, so that will be 2.5 seconds or 3 seconds of immunity to snares and roots. It's nice, but it's so short. And other than that, you will get about 22 seconds of major evasion. But the problem is the cost of the cost of Shuffle is way too much. It's about 4k more or less. If you use medium armor, maybe it's 3.8k or something around that amount. But it's really it's just too much for players to use, especially in non-CB campaign. Nobody is going to use that skill. It's going to cost way too much. So the changes Zos could do to that skill is either reduce the cost or maybe increase the duration of immunity to snares and roots. So make it maybe a flat 4 seconds like forward momentum. That would be a lot better, because if you compare to forward momentum is about 1k stamina cheaper than Shuffle, and it gives you a heal over time as well, which is really nice, and gives you major brutality. So there's 3 buffs in one, and it's a cheaper skill. So just compared to other skills, Shuffle is just really garbage now. So Zos has to make changes to Shuffle. Other than that, I think I want to talk about light armor. I think light armor is in a good spot as well. You sprint is a lot cheaper now on light armor. So especially like a class like Magicka Sorcerer, if you use your major expedition and you sprint, while after you streak you sprint, nobody is gonna catch you. You're gonna be so much faster now. So that is a good buff as well. So I think light armor is in a good place as well, because nobody is going to use heavy armor for a Magicka build at the moment. Light armor is just way too good compared to heavy armor. Okay, so that are my thoughts about armor types. Now I will go into races. Oh yeah, races. Okay. I want to give Zos some credit for races, because what they did throughout the patches is actually quite good. They made some races better, and I would say there are only 2 races at the moment, which is a little bit underwhelming, a little bit weaker than other races. So the first race, which is we could use a tiny buff, is Khajiit. I know Khajiit is a really strong class for PvE, so but okay, let me just compare Khajiit to Bosmer, which is Wood Elf. The 2 races that people would use when they are playing a Stamina Nightblade, because you get the crit, the sneak bonus with extra damage from sneak. So you compare those two. Khajiit obviously had weaker passive, because Khajiit has 10% stamina regen, which is nice. 20% health regen is okay only if you are using Choking or Magicka health regen set. So it is a little bit underwhelming, that passive. And 8% crit, which is nice in PvE and PvP as well, which is 8% crit is decent. It's not a lot, but it's decent. You compare that to Bosmer, which is Wood Elf. Wood Elf has 21% stamina regen. That is 11% more than Khajiit. And you include that to your 15% passive from Nightblade, it's gonna be insane. That's why Wood Elf player that uses something like Bone Pirate for Wood Elf, you're gonna have 3k stamina recovery easily. That is a lot of stamina recovery. And the second passive is the 6% max stam. That will give you a lot of damage as well, so boost up your stats, which is gonna be really nice. And what else? You receive poison and disease damage as well. Poison and disease damage is really underrated, because most of the stamina classes are gonna use a lot of poison and disease damage, enchantment or double dot poisons or incap. Just a lot of stamina skills are based on poison and disease damage, so the resistance is actually really useful. And yeah, so if you compare those two, I would say Khajiit is just weaker compared to to Wood Elf. The main reason why I picked Khajiit initially is because of the roleplay purpose. You know, you are sneaky cat for Nightblade is going to be really cool, and Wood Elf is just way too ugly and way too short. So that is the only reason why I picked Khajiit. If you could give me, if you turn back time, I would definitely change my Khajiit to Wood Elf, but I stick with Khajiit for way too long, so Khajiit it is. The changes that could be made to Khajiit is really simple. You could give a small bonus of crit resistance, maybe 200, 300 crit resistance, so it won't break, it won't affect the PvE side of things, because Khajiit is really strong in PvE. So you could give crit resistance, a little bit of crit resistance to Khajiit, or if you feel that that is breaking the immersion, you could give something like 20% or 15% stamina reduction to dodge roll for Khajiit, because you're a cat, you roll a lot, so that makes sense, right? So that those two could be the optional tiny buffs that would make Khajiit better in PvP. In PvE, yeah, just leave it as it is. You don't want to give any more damage to Khajiit. Just that the defensive side or resource side, you could help out with Khajiit a bit. Okay, so that is the first class that could use a little, first race that could use a little bit of buff, and the second race is the race that needs a big boost of health, because it's really weak in my opinion. Imperial. So Imperial has third passive. The first one is health, which is decent, and stamina, max stamina, which is decent. The third passive is really underwhelming because it has a 10% proc chance on melee attack, and you gain back 6% of your health. So 6% of your health, let's say you have 20k health, 6% is about 600 times 2, 1200. So 1200 health for a 10% proc chance on melee attack. That is ridiculous, because every time you weave in light attack, you're going to do 2 melee attacks every 1 second or 1.5 seconds. So if you do the maths, maybe around 6 to 7 seconds, you're going to proc it once. That is just ridiculously weak. So it's okay. I'll do some comparison. Compared to Not has a base passive that gives you 6% damage reduction instantly. So every damage comes to you, it get reduced by 6%. You compare that to the proc chance of 10% to Imperial. That is just ridiculous. Okay, if you want to compare to another class, Red Guard has a 4 or 5 second cooldown. Every melee attack you do without any proc chance, you get back resources. You compare to Not and Red Guard, Imperial is just pure garbage, I have to say. So what you could do to Imperial is pretty simple. You could increase the proc chance. That is the way better choice. Maybe 20% proc chance, or maybe 30% proc chance, and you want to include maybe a 3 second cooldown to the passive, so you won't get too much healing, or 4 second cooldown, maybe something like that. So you can proc it more often, and you're actually getting back some heals. It's like a non-existent passive at the moment, because 10% proc chance is just way too low. So that the simple method is just to increase the proc chance, or you could do something like you reduce the proc chance to 5%, but it will proc on every type of damage. So dot damage, ground damage, AoE damage, stuff like that. So it would proc more often. So there are two choices you could do to make it better. And so at least you feel that you are getting something back from the passive, because at the moment for Imperial, it's it's a weak race. Just simply put, it's a weak race compared to others. Okay, so those are the two races that could use some help. A small help for Khajiit and a big help for Imperial. Imperial needs a buff for sure, the third passive. Okay, now to the most important part, classes. Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I'm not playing Magicka DK and Templar a lot, so I will try to keep my comments on those two classes a bit shorter. But if you want to add some stuff that you disagree with me, just type them in the comment below. I will try to go through them. Maybe I'll give you a reply and see my argument to each classes. Okay, now let's start off with the strongest class. Controversial, Stamina Warden. Oh yeah, Stamina Warden it's already a top tier class, so Zos should just stop buffing this class. I know they buff the resource because for the PvE side of the game, because I think Stamina Warden is having issues with sustain in PvE, so they actually buffed the Boon Edge. It's good. It make PvP so much easier because now your resource is so good, because that skill costs nothing to use. So it's just gonna give you a lot of resources back, which is really nice. So what I would suggest is stop buffing anything for Stamina Warden damage and resource wise for PvP anymore, because any more sorts of buff will make Stamina Warden even stronger. Okay, the good thing about Zos is they did a small nerf to Subterranean Assault, so the major fracture is only now down to 5 seconds. That is a good buff. It reduces the damage a bit, so you have to recast it every 5 seconds. That's a good nerf, sorry. And yeah, what else? I think the only thing you could do to Stamina Warden is nerf it. Nerf the damage by a bit. Maybe nerf the 2-tip of Subterranean Assault by a bit. But other than that, I wouldn't touch Stamina Warden a lot. The thing if you want to buff Stamina Warden, you could include a small buff, which is change one of the Magicka skills to Stamina, because at the moment Stamina Warden has not a lot of offensive skills. I think only Subterranean Assault which is usable for Stamina Warden. Other than that, most of the other skills are good, really good defensive skills, really good buffing skills. But offensively, you only have 1 or 2 skills, so that is not good. What you could do is, what Source could do is just make a Stamina morph of Swamp, so the dot skill, just make one of the morph to Stamina, because I think those two Magicka skills are really similar, so Magicka Warden wouldn't lose out. Because Magicka Warden has already so many skills to choose from, you just make sure Stamina Warden has a bit of, maybe just, yeah, that skill is a dot damage skill as well, and Stamina Warden doesn't have a class dot damage skill, so that would be a good skill to give it to Stamina Warden. Just make sure the 2-tip is accordingly and not too strong, so you won't buff Stamina Warden any further. So conclusion for Stamina Warden, the class is as good as it is now, so you don't need to change anything for it. No need to change a lot for it. Just make sure you don't don't buff it anymore. Okay, now to Magicka Warden. Magicka Warden is a really interesting class because it's not as strong as Stamina Warden, but it has a lot of usage for rooting and snaring. And Zos actually did okay with this class during the recent patches. Firstly, Deep Fissure got a nerf and a buff, so it has no more stun, which is really a bummer because I really like the stun from Deep Fissure, but you receive Major Breach debuff now. That will increase the damage of Magicka Warden significantly, because now you don't need to use Elemental Drain, and you're not fixed to using destruction stuff. You could use Dual Wheel now, and you still can apply Major Breach, which is a really sweet debuff to increase your damage. The downside is the downside is there's no more stun, but Magicka Warden now has a stun from the skill called Arctic Blast. It's a good change now because you have more options to stun your enemy. It's always welcome to have different options, because you compare that to Magicka Templar. Okay, I'll go into Magicka Templar later, but Magicka Templar is I'll go on into Magicka Templar in detail later. A lot of stuff needs some changing. So the only problem with Arctic Blast now is the skill has a stun. It's nice, but the cost of the skill is way too high. It's 4.3k Magicka for a CC and a shitty heal, because the heal for Arctic Blast is actually really weak. Unless you are having 50k HP, then the heal is going to be significant. But if you are running a normal build like 25k health, Magicka Warden, you are not going to feel the heal at all, because its health percentage is 15%. So that is really low. I don't want to change the 2-tip of the 15%, because I want to make it a niche skill for those high health Magicka Warden. But what you could do is just reduce the cost slightly, reduce the cost by maybe 500 or 800 Magicka, so that you still need to use about 3k plus Magicka to use a stun, which is acceptable, but you don't need to spend like 4k plus to just use the CC ability. That is way too much compared to other CC ability. So that is the only problem, is the cost of that skill of Arctic Blast. Other than that, I think the skill is fine. The changes for Magicka Warden is actually alright. And Magicka Warden receive The Bone Edge got the buff as well, so you receive some resource gain that is really helpful for the sustaining in PvP as well. So that is a good change. Yeah, another skill that I want to mention, there are not a lot of problems with Magicka Warden at the moment, but there's one skill that I want to mention that could use a small buff, a damaging buff. That skill is called Frozen Gate. I bet a lot of people never heard of this skill before because nobody's going to use this skill. It's a trap skill basically, so when you put down, you can put 3 traps down. The traps will activate after 1.5 seconds, so it's really slow. It's not easy to use, and the moment enemies step on the trap, they will get a small debuff, and then they will port to you instantly. So it's a good skill that is to use to get people to come to you, and you can snare them on the AoE you put down. The only problem I have with this skill is it's really hard to use. So the impact isn't good because it's a trap skill. You have to aim, put on the ground, you have to make people to step it on it, and yeah, you need choke points to make the skill work. That is one of the problems, and it has a 1.5 seconds a charging time, applying time. So how you want to make this skill more attractive for players to use? The easiest thing to make this skill work is you increase the damage of the tooltip, because at the moment the tooltip damage is lower than it's really low. It's lower than Cliff Razor, and you need to remember that Cliff Razor can based on the range, Cliff Razor has increased damage. Increase, I think, up to 40% damage. So you want to make this skill the damage as high as, maybe at least as high as the base damage of Cliff Razor, which is not really high compared to other skills like Wrecking Blow or Supplementarian Assault. I'm not asking the skill to deal a lot of damage, but just make the damage higher so that it has an impact. The moment people step on the trap, they will feel, oh, they took some damage at least. Because at the moment, if you step on a trap, you won't feel, the damage is just way too low, and it's already such a niche skill, so you want to make it a bit more open for people to use it. You want to give people a reason to use the skill. So I think that would be a good buff to the Frozen Gate skill. Both of the morphs could use increased damage for tooltip. Okay, so that is the only skill I would the only other skill that I would say Magicka Warden need a buff, but other than that, Magicka Warden is actually in a good spot. In non-CV campaign, Magicka Warden can be a pain in the ass. You can just snare and root people non-stop. It's really fun. Okay, now to DKs. I'll start off with Magicka DK. I'm just gonna give my true opinion now. Magicka DK is fine this patch. It's strong, mainly because Zos did a really good job on improving this class. Wings now provide snare and immobilization immunity, which is great, so awesome. DK receive a Magicka and stamina resource buff from combustion passive. That is really good as well, because Magicka DK has some sustain issues that will help a lot, because the moment you proc burning status effect, you gain back, I think, I'm not sure how much, but you gain back a certain amount of Magicka back, and if you do poison damage, poison status effect, you gain back stamina. That is so good, such a good change. And the third buff is the gap close now gives you major expedition, so when you use chains to your enemy, you gain a 4-second major expedition. That helps with the sustain as well, not sustain, the mobility. So you have major expedition, you have snare and immobilization immunity. These two things are killing Magicka DK. Now those two things are solved, Magicka DK is actually really strong. That is a really nice touch. Good job, Zos. So you see, I won't criticize Zos if they are doing a good stuff, because those changes are actually really good. So there's not much to complain on this class, to be honest. But if you main a Magicka DK and you have a different outlook on the class, do let me know in the comments. I'll go through them. Maybe I missed out something, but for me, Magicka DKs that I thought are actually really strong this patch compared to the previous patches. Now to Stamina DK. My good old Stamina DK. Stamina DK is fine. It's not the strongest, it's not the weakest, it's just in between. It's fine. The only problem is there are a really limited amount of choices of skills for stamina class skill, for Stamina DK, because that's the main problem, because Stamina DK gets old really fast. You play it after 2 weeks. If you're new to the game, okay, maybe it's really interesting, but if you're a veteran player like me, Stamina DK is going to get boring really fast, because it relies so much on weapon skill line skills to be competitive. I can understand why most of the Magicka classes will have more Magicka skills, because stamina classes has more weapon choices, bow, two-hand, dual-wield, sword and board, compared to the two staffs Magicka classes have. I can understand that, but DK is in such a spot where there's only just a handful amount of, actually not less than a handful amount of skills you can use from, so it's going to be really boring after time. So my suggestion is to change some Magicka skill morphs to stamina ones, especially some skills are really similar to each other. The Magicka version, just a small, they have just a small differences. You could change those skills to Magicka. So the first skill I could suggest is the Ash Cloud. Ash Cloud is the AoE snare skill. Both of the morphs are quite similar, 70% snare and maybe just a small difference in the effect. So you could change that skill, or Dark Talons would be great as well, because it's just another root skill. Maybe change one of the morphs, the damaging morphs to stamina version, because people will always use the morph that gives damage reduction, minor meow, because Magicka DK doesn't have minor meow compared to stamina DK, because stamina DK you can use from sword and board Curig slash to get minor meow. So that morph would be good. So you can actually root some people as a stamina DK more. You have an AoE route as a stamina DK, that would be really sweet. You can change the damage type to poison. It's really straightforward. It's really simple. You can change it to poison or physical damage. That could work. And the third skill that I could suggest is Inhale. So Inhale is an AoE skill, AoE damaging skill. You could make it like poison AoE damage as well, because both of the morphs are really similar as well. So you could take one of the morph and change it to poison damage morph. So if Zos make changes to any one of these skills, I'll be happy, because Stam DK has been the same for like so many years, man. Like 4 years, it's more or less the same thing over and over again. So as a conclusion, Stam DK relies way too much on weapon skill lines, so having a few more options from the class skill line would be really important. So it keeps the class fresh, you know. So it won't there are more choices for you to pick from, and makes the class a bit more unique as well. Okay, so that's my thought on Stam DK. As for Templar, Templar is strong this patch. I'm not gonna lie, mainly because they received 3 really sweet buffs from Zos. Good job, Zos, kudos, because they tackle the problem of Templar. First thing, Templar has sustain issue. So what they did, they gave a mad resource buff to it. So restoring focus now gives you 480 stamina regen, and it's just so helpful for the sustain in PvP for Templar. The good thing about this buff is it applies even during if you're blocking or you're dodge rolling. The moment you put down restoring focus, you get a 480 stamina regen non-stop. So that is such a good buff for Stamina Templar. And the second buff is Stamina Templar receive a Stamina Ultimate, which is Empowering Sweeps. It's not a really strong ultimate, the damage wise, but it's a defensive ultimate because it reduces your damage taken by a significant amount, especially if you're fighting like 3 players and you hit this with 3 players, your damage reduction is going to be extremely high. So it's a good defensive and offensive ultimate, because this ultimate actually has a chance to proc Burning Light, so you can proc a bit more damage on your dot damage on your enemy. So this ultimate is actually quite nice. You can maybe backbar this ultimate, would be quite sweet. But I still think Dawnbreaker is stronger compared to this ultimate. And the third buffs changes they made to Templar is the CC from Binding Javelin is now a solid non-moving stun. So the moment you hit your enemy, it won't knock them back. The enemy will stun on that position. So this will help with having a CC skill, which is so important for Templar, because Templar has to rely on sword and board stun or wrecking blow stun, dizzying swing stun. So having a stun from your class skill line is going to be really helpful. So with these 3 buffs, I think Templar is a really good spot. No complaints, no buffs needed, no nerfs needed. A good class to play this patch. Okay, now to Magicka Templar. Where should I start? Magicka Templar is okay in this patch, but there are 2 essential adjustments needed for this class to be good in PvP. Because yeah, everybody who plays a Magicka Templar will know by now Magicka Templar is the class with the worst mobility. By mobility I mean it has no major expedition, there's no minor expedition, there's no root immunity skill, and we have to rely on a melee jabs to do as our main damaging skill. So that is a really big problem, especially when you're fighting a stamina class where they can just use something like shuffle or something like what do you call it, forward momentum to de-root and de-snare themselves. They can just get away from a Magicka Templar easily. You won't be able to chase them because you are just so slow, so to say. So that is really a pain in the ass, in my opinion. So this major deficiency made all Mag Plus rely overly on this misform skill. So that's the only skill you could use to actually, because you can't dodge roll as a Magicka class that often. You can maybe dodge roll once and that's about it. In non-CB campaign, if you dodge roll once, your stamina are all gone after you break free. So you have to rely overly on misform. And misform is a skill that is decent, but it's really expensive and you won't receive any Magicka recovery during the misform phase. So it's a skill that we are forced to use, even though we don't want to use it. If you get what I mean, as a Magicka Templar. So my suggestion I have a few interesting suggestions. The first one would be either give Cleansing Ritual skill a 3-second snare and root immunity after usage. So basically, if you cleanse yourself after using Cleansing Ritual, you gain a 3-second snare and root immunity. Because I know cleanse is a really good skill, but it costs so much. For the cost, it actually it's okay to give it this small buff. Maybe not 3 seconds, maybe 2 seconds snare and root immunity after usage. 3 seconds would be nice, would be a bit generous, but I think it's worth it because for the cost you use the skill, you have to use 4k Magicka to cleanse yourself as a light armor build. Remember that you have a lot of cost reduction and it still costs 4k Magicka, so it's a really expensive skill. That's why I feel like giving you a snare and root immunity after usage is actually would be quite nice. The other option is to give Magicka Templar immobilization immunity inside the area of Cleansing Ritual. So after you use Cleansing Ritual, right, if you are standing in that circle, in that I think 10-meter radius or something like that, you are immune to roots but not snares, because if you are immune to both of them it will be too strong. So I think root is the biggest problem for Magicka Templar because you have to rely on your jabs. The moment you get rooted, you can't really jab properly and it will just ruin your whole rotation. That's why I feel like because you want to Magicka Templar is all about building a house, right? You have your ground bars and everything. So having a root immobilization immunity in that Cleansing Ritual would be really useful. So in that area you can't get rooted. That is a really creative way, a creative buff for Cleansing Ritual. What else? Yeah, the second thing that Magicka Templar needs is besides the problem with mobility, is they have a problem with stunning enemies, because toppling charge is just an unreliable and a really buggy gap closer. It's one of the worst gap closer in the game. Nobody will use it. No good players will use it at all. And you have your Javelin. Javelin is a knockback skill as well. That's why it's not useful, especially if you're using a melee jab build. It's not useful at all. I would say the easiest solution is to reapply stun back into Blazing Spear skill. Blazing Spear skill is a skill where you throw a AoE dot on the ground, where if your friendly go, you can get back some resources by using the synergy. But previously, it is one of our main stun for the game. Blazing Spear is so good. It doesn't affect the PvE side of things as well, because yes, the stun is nice in some maybe Maelstrom Arena, but other than that, you're not going to use a lot of stuns in PvE. So Templar could definitely make use of this stun from Blazing Spear. So I would definitely suggest Blazing Spear to change to include a stun in Blazing Spear morph, because it is the offensive morph. And the other thing is Blazing Spear is a ground targeting skill. So with this buff, it actually does reward players who land it properly, because in PvP players are moving a lot, right? So you have to land this skill properly to stun your enemy. So it's rewarding if you use this skill and you get to stun your enemy. So for sure I would suggest this skill to have a stun. The other solution is an optional one, but I don't think it's the better one. The other solution is to remove the knockback from Aurora Javelin Moth. But then the problem is you're gonna sacrifice, because some players are playing niche range Magicka Templar builds, so you'll be losing a range stun, like a proper stun that knockbacks enemy. Because if you're playing a range Magicka Templar build, you want to keep your distance. So yeah, range build might be a bit frustrated with that change. That's why I feel like the give Blazing Spear a stun would be the best option. Yeah, I just want to mention that, Zos, if you're still listening until now, make sure you do something about this situation, because I can just list it down now. Every other Magicka and Stamina classes has way better options for mobility out there. For example, Magicka Nightblade or Stamina Nightblade has Major Expedition, Cloak, Shadow Image, 3 of the best mobility skills. Magicka Decay now has Wings, which is extremely good, removes Root, removes Snares, and a Gap Closer with Major Expedition. So Magicka Decay and Stamina Decay is fine. Stamina Decay is always fine because you have forward momentum anyways. Magicka Warden has Major Expedition and a lot of roots and snares to chase down enemies. So Magicka Warden is actually fine as well. Because of the wings, you have Major Expedition. And you have Shimmering Shields to protect you from range attacks. Magicka Sorcerer has one of the best mobility as well. You have Major Expedition and Streak, so it's so strong. So this is my reasoning. Every classes have root removability, snare removability, or some source of Major Expedition, and they have so many options for other classes. Why is Magicka Templar not having this? Stamina Templar is fine because they have forward momentum and shuffle, and they can dodge throw a lot, but Magicka Templar doesn't have that luxury. So Zos, if you're listening, take action please. One good CC skill, and yeah, we need mobility skills. Okay, now my rant for Magicka Templar is done. Stamina Sorcerer. I'll start off with Stamina Sorcerer. Stamina Sorcerer is actually decent this patch. It's not the strongest, not the weakest, but the only biggest problem of Stamina Sorcerer is a bit similar to Stam Decay. But the only problem is it has a lot of supporting skills, but there's only one offensive class ability for Stamina Sorcerer, which is Hurricane. So as a Stamina Sorcerer, you rely on an extreme amount of weapon skills and even ultimate like Dawnbreaker to be competitive. I know there's no easy solution to this problem, because the whole pet skill line is catered to Magicka Sorcerer, because as a Stamina Sorcerer you can't shield your pet, so pets will die in a blink of an eye. So the whole skill line is useless for Stamina Sorcerer. That's why I would say the best bet would be changing Mage's Wrath Morph to a Stamina skill, because people will only use Endless Fury usually. Or you could yeah, having this skill as a Stamina Execute is pretty cool in my opinion. But other than that, I don't know, maybe a Stamina version of Crystal Blast, because no way in hell is any Magicka Sorcerer using that skill. So you could change that skill, change some effect, change rework the whole skill into a Stamina skill. So you throw like I don't know, maybe not a lightning ball, but a poison ball to your enemy. That could be quite interesting. So that is the only problem I have with Stamina Sorcerer. You don't have enough of offensive skill for you to take advantage of the class. You only have Hurricane. Other than that, all the other skills are just buff, mobility skills, and that's about it. So that's my biggest problem with Stamina Sorcerers. To Magicka Sorcerer, Magicka Sorcerer took a big hit to their offensive capability. Not really a extreme hit, but their damage is lower now this patch, because now you have to invest a good amount of max Magicka into max health due to the shield changes. So I personally dislike the change, but yeah, it kind of took a unique mechanic away from the game, because shields are quite unique on itself. But what done is done. I don't think Zos will change it back to what it is. So what could be done is, since now you have lower max Magicka, so your damage output is going to be lower overall, what I would personally do is maybe increase the damage slightly for Magicka Sorcerer. I don't want to make it too much so that it affects PvE too much, but Magicka Sorcerer, in my opinion, is not the top class for PvE DPS, right? So what you could do is, you could include a 5% increased magic damage to the existing 5% physical and shock damage in the energized passives, from the Storm Calling skill line. So you could include a 5% magic damage, so that could increase the damage slightly for Magicka Sorcerer, but it wouldn't be a game breaking buff, just a small buff for damage wise, because now obviously you need to invest a lot into health, and you need to invest a lot into impant, and you can't use infuse anymore, you can't use divines anymore, even well fitted is not a good trait anymore. So that's the only downside of Magicka Sorcerers. Your damage took a hit. And one more thing, I would suggest that a small cost reduction on Daedric Mines could be helpful, because in non-CB campaign that skill costs way too much Magicka. It's just not good. It costs way too much in my opinion. So yeah, reducing the cost by maybe 500 or something like that, just reduce the cost a bit, would be really helpful. Okay, so that's my opinion on Magicka Sorcerers. And now to Magicka Nightblades. Oh yeah, interesting. Magicka Nightblade is overall still a good class, but it has its issue with Magicka Sustain in recent patches, because this is the result of the PvE balance, because Magicka Nightblade was the top tier damage output class, and so they increase the cost of Merciless Resolve. You need to, when you shoot the bow, you have to use Magicka, and Swallow Soul got a huge cost increase. And I know everything is done to balance out the PvE sustain for Magicka Nightblade. It's understandable. So, but PvP took a big hit from that. So the best solution I could think of for this problem is to include something really interesting called Minor Intellect into the Siphoning class passive. Minor Intellect is a small buff that increases Magicka recovery, I think by 10%, is it? I'm not 100% sure, but it gives you a small amount of Magicka recovery. I think it's 8% or 10%. The good thing about this, it doesn't affect PvE a lot, because in PvE your Magicka recovery is a lot lower compared to PvP. In PvP, usually you will run 2k, 2.5k, more or less, around that amount. In PvE, you will run about maybe 1k or something like around that amount. So if you include Minor Intellect, it won't affect PvE as much as PvP. So that would be a good change. So you could include it to something like the Siphoning class passive Transfer. So Transfer will turn out to be like, after you activate the Siphoning skill, it grants you 2 ultimate, and it grants you maybe 10 seconds of Minor Intellect, for example. Or another choice is you could include it into the Merciless Resolve skill. So Merciless Resolve is, at the moment, it does higher damage than the Stamina Morph, but the Stamina Morphs gives you the minor intellect stamina version. I can't remember the name of that buff, but so you could reduce the damage of because the damage of Merciless Resolve is extremely high, but for that skill you need to do 5 light attack, so it's good for that damage. But you could reduce the damage a bit and give us Minor Intellect instead of the damage increase for that skill. That would be another option as well. So sustain aside, yeah, Sauce, I think I even did a video about this. Please fix Shadow Image. It's so buggy now, the skill. Sometimes I'm still wondering, should I use it or not, because I'm using a Necropotent on my build, so I'm forced to use that skill even though it's buggy. So please, I'll link the video in the description below, so explaining all the problems of that skill. Make sure you go watch it, and Zos, please fix this skill. And one last thing, there's one garbage skill that needs a total rework. It's called Malevolent Offering. Nobody's gonna use this skill in PvE and in PvP. It's so garbage at this state, because you have to sacrifice health. You do a damaging health dot on yourself to heal someone. It's so stupid. It's like a garbage version of Breath of Flight, where you have to not use resources but use your health as your resource and kill yourself to heal somebody. It's so stupid. It needs a rework. It's just not good, to be honest, the skill. I know the skill doesn't cost any resource, but you are taking away health from yourself, so it's already bad. Anything that reduces your own health is so bad. It's not a good skill. I know they buffed it somehow in the recent patches, but it still needs some help, the skill. Preferably a total rework, because I don't think that skill is good enough. Okay, now to the last class. It's a really short one. Magicka Nightblade. Magicka Nightblade is good, in a good spot. The nerf to incap is extremely welcome. It's way overpowered, and the overall sustain is fine. Damage is fine too. Besides the bulky shadow image skill, I think Stamina Nightblade is in a really good spot. I enjoy playing this class. I don't feel it needs any buff or any nerf. It's a perfect class for every player that wants to jump into any to Nightblade. Stamina Nightblade is the way to go. Okay, so that's about it for this video. That's a wrap. Thanks for watching until the end, and yeah, do let me know about your thoughts, about my ideas and the buff and nerfs, my suggestions. See how it compares to your perspective. Just type in the comments below, and make sure you throw this video a like as well. That will be really appreciated, and make sure you subscribe if you want to see more ESO videos, and I will see you guys in Cyrodiil. Bye bye.